Hi everyone, and welcome to Southridge. If this is your first time joining us in this format, an extra special welcome to you. We also want to offer a few tips on how to make the most of this experience. Be sure to crank up the volume during the music and sing along. Don't worry, we can't hear you. Musicians, download the music charts below the video, grab your instrument, and play along. For any kids participating with us, don't worry if you don't know or can't read the words. Just sing, dance, or make music of your own. We're so happy when you join in with us. If English isn't your first language or you experience hearing challenges, we encourage you to turn on the closed captioning on this video or download the transcripts for this morning's message. And be sure to download the Southridge app. This is the best way to stay connected and informed about everything that's going on here at Southridge. It's completely free and super easy to use. We love to worship together as a community of all ages, and we recognize the different needs kids might have in an experience like this. With that in mind, please explore the online service page to find engaging weekly teaching for preschoolers, elementary-aged kids, and junior youth. You can also sign up to receive notifications on the app for your relevant age group, and we will send you a guide every Sunday morning to further the conversation at home. For the next hour, I invite you to engage with this experience, just as if you were with us in person. You're surrounded by a community of diverse, curious, open-minded, and inclusive people, all desiring to tap into the power and presence of God together as we worship, pray, listen, laugh, and grow. There might be some things we do or say today that really resonate with you, and that's great. There might also be things that stretch and challenge you, and we think that's good too. Ultimately, we encourage you to engage openly, thoughtfully, honestly, and wholeheartedly, trusting that the God we're here to connect with is a God who above all else is love. So as we begin our time together, wherever and whenever you are, whether this is your first time with us or you've been around forever, we hope that for the next hour you feel like you're among friends. Welcome to Southridge. We're so glad you're here.
Setting same, while praise your name. Great is your faithfulness to me. To age, though the earth may pass away, your word remains the same. Your history can prove there's nothing you can't do, 'cause you're faithful and true. Though the storms may come and the winds may blow, I'll remain steadfast and let my heart learn when you speak a word, it will come to from my faith in Jesus, my anchor to the ground, my hope and firm foundation. He'll never let me down. I put my faith in Jesus, my anchor to the ground, my hope and firm foundation. He'll never let me down. I put my faith in Jesus, my anchor to the ground, my hope and firm foundation. He'll never let me down. He'll never let me down. Great is your faithfulness to me. Great is your faithfulness to me. From the rising sun to the setting same, I will praise your name. Great is your faithfulness to me. You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you, I worship you. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are here, touching every heart. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, healing every heart. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, turning lives around. I worship you, Sing even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop. 'Cause you are a waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. 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 You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are.
You people are crazy.
Rolling?
Oh, good pause.
Sorry, I got some bugs up in here.
Oh, wow.
Oh, it's like it's snowing.
Flock of them.
We are a diverse community of imperfect people
who see the church as less of something to go to and more of a life to be lived and shared with others.
We are continually growing in what it means to love one another, fighting for unity rather than fighting over unnecessary arguments.
We are living to serve this world in the way of Jesus, serving those in need and those on the margins, knowing that friendship truly makes the difference.
So if you're coming with questions or curiosities,
Hurts or frustrations,
Joys or celebrations.
Wondering if the church can bring clarity or hope.
or simply be a place to belong, we invite you to be at home with us.
we invite you to explore with us.
We invite you to grow with us.
And we invite you to belong with us.
Welcome to Southridge.
We're glad you're here.
Hey there, my name's Mike Minema and I serve as the Welland location pastor here at Southridge. We're so glad you're participating with us this week, and I hope that this has already been a meaningful experience for you. I'm standing here in our Welland location, and if you've never joined us for one of our in-person gatherings at one of our physical Southridge locations, we invite you and would love to have you consider joining us in person when you feel ready and able. While we're so grateful to have this online platform to share in this experience from wherever and whenever we find ourselves, we love it even more when we can gather together in person to embrace the magic of community. So please know that you're welcome to join us any Sunday in person, and we'll strive to quickly help you know that you belong, especially if you've ever felt excluded or ignored by the church. We'd love the chance to change your experience and to let you know that you're loved, accepted, and welcomed with us. In fact, if you happen to live in the Welland area, I'd love to personally invite you to our location, and I'd be thrilled to have the chance to meet with you and help you decide if you want to join us. And if you live in or near St. Catharines or Vineland, in those areas, I know that you'll find the same welcome at those locations too. Now, for any of you who are brand new to all of this and may be participating with us in this online service for the very first time ever, we definitely want to say a special welcome to you. It's good to meet you, so to speak, even through the screen. And we're so glad you've chosen to check us out. We hope you feel like you're among friends and family, even in this format. As our way of saying thanks for joining us for the first time, we'd love to give you a gift of our Southridge Jam from our social enterprise, the Southridge Jam Company. If you click on the New Here or the Gift button below and shares a little bit of contact information, we'll be in touch and safely will deliver a jar of Southridge Jam to you this week. Similarly, if you're looking for a way to get in touch with us, to meet with a pastor, ask any questions, maybe get baptized, learn how you could get involved in our community, take a moment to fill out the Connect card on our website or the app, and we'll be in touch with you this week. For those of us who call this community home, one of the ways we practice togetherness is by expressing our gratitude to God and our generosity to others through our regular financial contributions. This is one of the ways we can invest in our lives, in what God is doing in and through our church community, making a difference by meeting the needs among us, across our region, and around the world. All of our online giving options are available on our website, and so if you're able to give this week, we invite you to do so with a spirit of joy, generosity, and we thank you in advance for your faithfulness. Now, we want to transition into this week's talk, and as we prepare to hear it together, we invite you to remove as many distractions as possible and to listen in to what God might want to be saying uniquely to you. We're so glad you've joined us, and we look forward to growing together.
So, anything in particular you'd like to talk about for my last sermon, my farewell sermon at Southridge? Anything that might interest you? It's been a weird thing to think about, I have to be honest, to think about what I would preach upon for a farewell sermon at a church that has been the only home church that I've had for 43 years of my life. Many you don't know, I was here as a 6-year-old at Southridge on the very first Sunday that we opened the doors in 1980. Back then it was called Fairview Louth Mennonite Brethren Community Church, Flimbakuka, as we called it then. And this has been my home church for 43 years. Maybe you don't know, this has been the only job I have held in my entire adult life. I took this job on September 1st, 1997, 4 months after graduating from university, and this is it. This is the only job I've ever had. In fact, yesterday was my 9,000th day on the job at Southridge Community Church. And I've kind of been thinking about, what do you say at the end of all of that? What do you say? What words do you say to give meaning or to draw the meaning out of all of that? In some ways, it feels very much like I'm preaching my own funeral sermon that you all get to now watch by video. And you know what? There's something actually fitting about that. It's not my funeral. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not moving out of the area or whatever. But there's a verse in Ecclesiastes that says it's better to go to a funeral home than a birthday party, because when you live in a space where you intentionally think about loss and grief, it brings perspective and wisdom. And I think that's what I've been thinking about the most lately. And so as I've been asking myself, what would I preach on for my last sermon at Southridge, my mind for the last couple of months has just kept going back to Ecclesiastes chapter 3. And I'm going to read this poem for you. It's not going to be on the screen. I just want you to sit, listen, close your eyes if you want to, just take in the words. But this is what it says in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, starting in verse 1. There's a season for everything, and a time for every matter under the heavens, a time for giving birth and a time for dying, a time for planting and a time for uprooting what was planted, a time for killing and a time for healing, a time for tearing down and a time for building up, a time for crying and a time for laughing, a time for mourning and a time for dancing, a time for throwing stones and a time for gathering stones, a time for embracing and a time for avoiding embraces, a time for searching and a time for losing, a time for keeping and a time for throwing away, a time for tearing and a time for repairing, a time for keeping silent and a time for speaking, a time for loving and a time for hating, a time for war and a time for peace. I've been thinking about this poem, I think, because of its main point, which is actually brought out right in the very first verse of the chapter. In Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 1, it says, "There is a season for everything and a time for every matter under the heavens." In other words, as you go through life, as I go through life, as we do this journey, we are going to experience everything, all kinds of things. In fact, in my last sermon, you'll give me permission to dig into the poetry of this for just a minute. It's interesting that after that thesis statement, there are actually 14 pairs of opposites in the poem, which is kind of a significant number. We've talked about before how in the Hebrew Bible in particular, numbers can often be symbolic, and the number 7 and multiples of 7 are often symbolic of completeness. It goes back to the creation story. When God does something in the world, God does it in 7 and it's complete, right? The 7 days of the week. And so the fact that there are 14 pairs, 7, the number of completeness, times 2, which could be thought of as fullness, that in the course of our life, we're just going to experience the full completeness of all of the experiences that there are to be had in the world. In fact, each one of these pairs, there's 14 pairs, so there's 28 items. You can kind of keep doing numbers. 7 for completeness times 4. The number 4 is often symbolic of something being universal, the 4 corners of the globe, the 4 points of the compass, that everyone everywhere, just by virtue of living life, is going to experience a time for everything. These pairs, even deeper, are called merisms. And a merism is when you talk about something by only referring to the 2 extremes, right? We cleaned our house from stem to stern. Now, my house doesn't have a stem and it doesn't have a stern, but what it means is not just here and here, but we cleaned everything in between. The groom was handsome from head to toe. And we're not saying he had a nice haircut and great shoes. We're saying like every part of him from this end to that end, every part of it was handsome. Like that's how this works. It's not a time to be born and a time to die. There's a time for everything that happens in between. That's how the poem works. It's a way of just kind of naming honestly that life is going to be filled with a bit of everything. When you think about these pairs, in every pairing, one is positive, a time to be born, something you'd like to experience, or a time to give birth in this translation. And the other is negative, something you don't want to experience, a time to die. And it happens over and over again, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build up. There's always a negative and a positive. And if you'll permit me to quote the lyrics of a TV theme song from when this church was planted in 1980 that I watched as a kid, you take the good, you take the bad, you take them both, and there you have the facts of life. That's just what life is. It is just the experience of opening yourself to experiencing a bit of everything, the good and the bad and the ugly. It's interesting when you look at the pairs that it's not always that the positive comes first and then the negative. It goes back and forth. The first 2 pairs are positive and then negative. The next 5 are negative, then positive. And then it flip-flops, and then the poem ends with positive, negative, negative, positive. It's like, the philosopher Forrest Gump who says life's like a box of chocolates. You just don't know what you're going to get. You're not in control. And this is the point of the poem, that what it means to live life is it means to be open to experiencing whatever it is that life brings. And over the course of life, it's going to bring a bit of all of it. And some of it will be positive and some of it will be negative, and none of it will be in our control. And the point of the poem is this, that wisdom, because Ecclesiastes is a book of wisdom, wisdom is about responding rightly to what life brings, when life brings all of it. I've been thinking about this poem a lot because for me and my family, for you and your family, the last couple of years have been a time to endure. It's been a global pandemic to endure. And I and our family, we didn't have all the experiences that you and your family had, all the struggles and challenges that you faced. But we faced the pandemic as both a frontline healthcare family and a frontline ministry family. And we experienced all the struggle and the challenge and even the trauma that's associated with enduring the pandemic in those terms. For us, for me, and for my family, in addition to that, the last couple of years has been a time to endure struggles and challenges and even traumas that have nothing to do with the pandemic. And I know that for a lot of you, this is the most interesting part of the story, right? This is from the reaction we've gotten over the last couple of weeks since I announced my resignation. This is, kind of been an undercurrent, and the conversation has been what's really happened, right? That's what people want to know. A friend of mine from the St. Catharines location, who I love dearly, wrote and said, I want to know what really happened because I'm nosy, but also because I care. And I know that that's the undercurrent. And we've already heard a lot of stories about what really happened. I've heard about my health. I've heard that we're leaving because of my wife's health. I learned that we're moving, apparently, to Calgary. Somebody said that my family's moving to Manitoba, a story that should have been obviously false right on its face, because who moves to Manitoba, right? I've heard that I got fired for something that I said from the stage, which at least that story has the virtue of believability. I mean, Vegas odds were on my time at Southridge was going to end because I said something stupid from the stage. But the point is, I'm already hearing all sorts of stories. And you know what? It's just rumors. It's just gossip. None of it's true, and none of it deserves any of us to pay any attention to it, and certainly not to pass it around. The point is, over the last couple of years, my family and I have experienced a time to endure our own struggles and challenges, and we've experienced the last couple of years as a time to reflect, where we've unplugged and disconnected and stepped back from all of the things that have contributed to the busyness that just keeps life moving in this forward direction without actually thinking about it. And we've taken the last couple of years to step back and to think about who we are and who we're becoming and who our family is and what our family needs. And in the midst of this time to endure and this time to reflect, we decided that it was time for a change. At the end of the day, that's it. It wasn't an easy decision. Obviously, this has been my home church for 43 years. I was baptized here by a man who still attends here, whom I dearly love, Reverend John Eckert. I was married here. I buried my mom here, buried my son here, baptized a couple of my girls here. I made friends here. This was my community. This has been my family. I mean, this has been the core of my life for the last 43 years. It's been hard to think about leaving because of everything that God has done here. When I started on September 1st, 1997, we were 156 people meeting in one location, in one service, in a small little country church west of St. Catharines. And I had no idea the ride that we were about to take, and I had no idea how it was going to transform me as a human being. I had no idea 24 and a half years ago about compassion and justice for friends who've experienced life in the streets, or for migrant farm workers, or for people who experience food insecurity. I had no idea what it would mean to love LGBTQ plus people in a way that makes them feel loved. I Had no idea what it looked like to make space in my life for the perspectives and views of Black and Indigenous and people of color. I had no idea back then that following Jesus was simply about opening yourself up to receiving the love of God and then living that love in and into the world. I am a different person because of the last 24 years. And it's been hard to decide that now is the time for a change, but it is. And since coming to that decision earlier this year, it has only been confirmed time and time again that this is the right decision at the right time. And even confirmed by many of you in your thoughts and notes. I had somebody say to me probably 3 or 4 years ago, I feel like you're leaving us. And I didn't know what that meant at the time. And I announced my resignation. They emailed back and said, that feeling never left me. This is the right moment, and it's been confirmed. And part of what makes it hard is that it's hard to understand why in some ways. In Ecclesiastes 11, chapter 3, verse 11, this is after the poem where a lot of scholars think the writer is unpacking some of the meaning. It says in verse 11, God has placed eternity in their hearts without enabling them to discover what God has done from beginning to end. The writer of Ecclesiastes says, in the poem, part of what makes life hard is that it's just this soup of everything. It's this mixture of experiences of good and bad and ugly, and it's not within our control, and you never know what you're going to get. And the only thing you could do is to learn how to respond with wisdom to it. And in verse 11, he says, and part of what makes it hard is that so much of it doesn't make sense. We don't get why so much of it is happening. And I'd say that's been true of me and us in this last season in my family. We don't get why the last couple of years have been the way that we are. We don't get why everything has unfolded in the way that it has. We don't get why now is the time for a change, even as we are convinced that it is. And I think some of you are going to have that experience in this whole process too. That you don't get why all of this is happening. It just seems to come out of nowhere. And I totally am sympathetic with that experience. For some of you, you have to understand that for Krista and me, there's been a conversation for a couple of years. I think something we've been talking about Jeff with for a long time. And something, whether it was right or wrong, we decided to not upset any apple carts until we knew that this was the right thing, which, was earlier this year. I think for some people, you don't get why this feels so fast. And I can see that too, how it feels like I'm just vanishing. And I need to say, because of the way churches hit headlines these days, I do need to say you will not read any headlines about me in any media environment about some secret sin or some scandal in my life that, was ultimately the cause of my leaving here, whatever. That's not going to happen. The story of my leaving is basically once we came to the conclusion that it was time for a change, emotionally, we just knew it was time to make that change, to not delay that. I have never quit a job before. Some of you have, and you know what it feels like when you've put in your notice, how psychologically and emotionally hard it is to keep showing up and to bring all of yourself after that. And I was finding that to be a challenge for myself. Somebody said to me, again, after we announced my resignation, they said, I was kind of feeling some of the energy and passion slipping out of your preaching. Some were feeling that. I was feeling it. And so instead of sticking around and lingering and dragging it out and it being harder, to keep showing up for me and my family and for you as a church to keep getting half of my heart and whatever, we just decided if it's time for a change, it's time for a change. And even though it's not totally comprehensible to us or to you or whatever, here's my favorite part of that verse where it says, God hasn't enabled us to understand what God has done from beginning to end. The thing that encourages me about that verse is even though we don't understand, God is still doing here what God has always done, which is to bring God's kingdom to earth as it is in heaven, through the life and death and resurrection of Jesus Christ poured out by God's Spirit into the community of people who long to be Jesus-shaped people in their lives. God is still doing and will continue to do what God has always done in this church. In fact, my favorite part of verse 11, I didn't read for you before. My favorite part is the first part where it says, God has made everything fitting in its time. You know I'm not going to preach one last sermon without telling you about a Hebrew word. The word fitting is the Hebrew word yafeh. And yafeh most of the time is just translated as beautiful. Something that is beautiful to behold. Something that is obviously to be admired because of what it is. Sometimes it's translated this way as proper or fitting, as being appropriate to your expectations. In other words, whether it's beautiful or fitting, God has made everything the very best version of what that thing is supposed to be right in the time when God is doing it. There is not a season that we experience where God is not at work making it as beautiful in that season as it could possibly be. Which is not to say, by the way, that God brings pain and trauma and suffering in our lives. God is not responsible for that. What it is to say, 7 days after we celebrated the resurrection of Jesus, what it is to say is that in every season, regardless of what we're experiencing, God is present to us to make that season beautiful in its time. To make it the very best version of what God intended it to be if we're prepared to step into that season, open to the presence of God and ready to respond in the way of Jesus. Because that's what God is doing, even in this season at Southridge right now. I think Southridge's very best days are still ahead of it. Because, and you also knew I couldn't preach one last sermon without quoting Jesus. In Matthew 16:18, Jesus says, I will build my church. I will build my church. Jesus doesn't say I might build my church. He doesn't say maybe I'll build my church. He doesn't say I'm going to try to build my church. This is a promise that you can take to the bank. Jesus says that in the midst of all of the uncertainty and all of the different seasons and the good and the bad and the unpredictability and the uncontrollability and the incomprehensibility of life, the one thing that you can count on is that Jesus is going to build his church. Jesus is going to keep building this church, which, by the way, Jesus says is his church. This isn't Mike Krause's church, as though I had anything to do with who we are now. This isn't Jeff Lockyer's church, as though he's built anything in the last 24 years. This isn't even your church. This is Jesus' church, and it was Jesus' church before September 1st, 1997, and it will continue to be Jesus' church after May 1st, 2022. It'll continue to be Jesus' church after Jeff Lockyer's gone, after the whole leadership structure is gone, after you're even gone. This is Jesus' church, and Jesus only does one thing with his church, and that is Jesus builds it. He makes it beautiful in its time. He makes it the very best version of the thing that he always dreamed and imagined it could be if from top to bottom, one more merism, from top to bottom, we as individuals and as a community are committed to opening ourselves up to God's loving presence in our midst. And we are opening ourselves up to be transformed by the Holy Spirit to respond in a Jesus-shaped way, where we receive the love that God has poured out for us by his Spirit through Jesus. And then we live that love in and into the world. That love for God, that love for ourselves, that love for each other. That love for the forgotten and ignored, the love for the traumatized and painful and downtrodden, love for society and the world and even our enemies and the planet, that if we will open ourselves up to receiving the love that God has poured out in Jesus and open ourselves up to stepping into a Jesus-shaped response, then Jesus will continue to build his church, this church, and make it into the most beautiful version of what God always imagined that Southridge could be. And friends, I can't wait to hear the stories of what God does from here forward. I love you all. I really do. I'm going to miss you all. I'm not leaving because of any of you. In fact, it's all of you that have made this the hardest decision that I think I've ever had to make in my life. But Jesus will build his church. And God will make this church, God will continue to make this church beautiful in its time. And people will tell the stories of the ways they have encountered God in Christ by the Spirit because of what God has done among all of you. And I can't wait to hear the stories. Let me pray for you all. And I'm going to pray Jesus' prayer for our church. Our Father, who is in heaven and sovereign over everything, hallowed be your name. Would your name and your fame be obvious in this church and throughout the world because of your love. May your kingdom continue to come, and may your will be increasingly done on earth in this community, just as it is in heaven. Would you give us today our daily bread, everything that we need to be your people from beginning to end? Would you forgive us for all the ways that we've chosen unlove, even as we forgive all of the times that others have been unloving towards us? Would you keep us from the temptation to choose anything but love and spare us from the trials of the evil one, because yours is the kingdom, and yours is the power, and yours is the glory today and forever and ever. Amen.
You know, for many of us, as we've processed the idea of Mike leaving, we felt that this news is not only significant and in many ways sad, but also very sudden. And for many people I've talked to in the past week or so, they've wondered kind of what to do and how to process news like this. Well, one thing that we feel as a leadership that we all can do right here, right now, is engage in the spiritual practice of honoring a leader. The practice of honoring a leader. In the New Testament, the author of the book of Hebrews says to honor your spiritual leaders and even to submit to their authority, not as an authoritative comment, but it goes on to say, because they keep watch over your souls. And at the end of the day, for almost a quarter century, that's what Mike Krause has been part of doing on our behalf here at Southridge. He's been willing to take the responsibility to take watch for our souls, to take responsibility for our spiritual development and for our capacity to understand God and the Bible and to know Jesus better. And that responsibility, the Bible says, is worth honor. So in just a moment, we're going to play a song over you. And as we do, I'd encourage you to take a step back and just reflect on the impact that Mike's life and his ministry has had on you personally and on us together as a church community. And then take some time to make some notes, put pen to paper to reflect on that, so that we can personally and together provide some honor to this spiritual leader among us. In person at our live locations, we're going to do this by putting pencil to paper, but here online, we're going to encourage everyone after the online service, so it doesn't complicate with the video player, to send an email to an email we've created called encouragements@southridgechurch.ca. Encouragements@southridgechurch.ca. And if every one of us would provide that kind of honor through that email format, we're going to make sure that every comment and every affirmation and every encouragement and every appreciation gets to Mike so that he can cumulatively experience the weight of the affirmation and honor that we have for him. So as we play this song over you, take some time to reflect on the difference that Jesus' life through Mike's life and ministry has had on your life and your family and on our community as a whole, and jot some thoughts down in order to honor Mike as we engage in this practice personally and together as a church family, honoring the spiritual leadership of Mike Krause.
I thank the Lord for laughter, and I praise Him for my tears, for timely conversation to calm a storm of fear. I thank Him for the times we say nothing much at all. Oh, dear friend, for you I am so thankful. For the comfort of a soothing touch, the look that says you care, for the wisdom of well-chosen words, for honest, heartfelt prayers, for the faith that holds the weaker one when I have no strength at all. Oh, dear friend, for you I am so thankful. Is real. In His body we can feel the forgiveness and the grace that sent Jesus in our place. In the love of God it burns in our hearts, so we can learn how to live, how to love again. Closeness of the fellowship of those who know their need, of a grace that knows no boundaries, and a love beyond our dreams, for the power of togetherness as we seek the highest goal. Oh, dear friend, for you I am so thankful. And the grace that set Jesus in our place, and the love of God it burns in our hearts, so we can learn how to live and how to love again. And the love of God is real. In His body we can feel the forgiveness and the grace that sent Jesus in our place. In
Sing this out together. It's there in the newborn cry. It's there in the newborn cry. It's there in the light of every sunrise. There in the shadows of this light, your great grace. There on the mountain top, it's there every day and in the mundane. There in the sorrow and the dancing, your great grace. Oh, such grace. From creation to the cross, there from the cross into eternity, your grace finds me. Yes, your grace finds me. There on the wedding day, it's there in the weeping by the graveside. There in the very breath we breathe, your great grace. Same for the rich and poor, same for the saint and for the sinner, not for this whole wide world, your great grace. Oh, such grace. From creation to the cross, there from the cross into eternity, your grace finds me. Yes, your grace finds me in the darkest night. There in the darkest night of the soul, there in the sweetest songs of victory, your grace finds me. Yes, your grace finds me. Your great grace, oh, such grace. Your great grace, oh, such grace. Same for the rich and poor, same for the saint and for the sinner, not for the whole wide world, your great grace, oh, such grace. So I'm breathing in your grace, breathing out your praise, breathing in your grace,
for joining us today. We hope that you felt inspired and challenged by our time together. Now, we know that for what we've heard today to become reality in our daily lives, it's going to take more than this 1 hour a week that we spend together. It requires a daily, moment-by-moment, everyday commitment to practicing the way of peace and the way of Jesus. That's why we provide a host of ways to continue to lean into God's presence while we're away from each other. As always, you can click the Practice This Week button below the player for daily spiritual exercises to continue to develop the muscles we've started building today. If it helps, you can also opt into the Spiritual Practices notifications on our app to get those helpful reminders every morning as you start your day. As our time together ends, we're going to put some questions on the screen. If you're watching with others, they can serve as great conversation starters and can be adapted to have conversations with people of all ages. But they can also be a great way of processing and personalizing what you've heard today on your own. If you'd like a more personal conversation with someone about anything that's going on in your life, please reach out to our location pastors who will follow up with you privately. You could also fill out a Connect card, which you can find on our website or app. That's all for now. Thanks for joining us and have a great week. Bye.
Thank you.